Hey guys, in this video we're going to be installing Postman. Now Postman is an excellent tool for collaboration and API testing and validation and all of those wonderful things. So it's pretty easy to install. Really, you just go to postman.com, Postman just like the guy who delivers your mail, postman.com. You download the app. And of course, you choose your OS. So I have a 64-bit Windows, and then the download starts. All right, so once that download is finished, you can go ahead and open the installation file, run the installer. All right, so when it is finished, you will either see a screen prompting you to sign up or sign in, or you'll see this screen. Either way, if you see something to sign in, I would encourage you to do so. I actually had it on my machine already. So, the flow may not be exactly like this. But if you do see this page come up, then it's fine. You can just click the X and you can take it off. And I am not signed in anyway. So if you do see the or sign up screen looking something like this, then you can just go ahead and create an account. Sorry about that. You can create an account quite easily, username, password, or you just sign in with Google. Now, I like to just sign in with Google. And the thing is that Postman will keep a history of every test that you've done once you have an account. All right. So I'm just going to go ahead and sign in with Google. All right. And once you're signed in, then you can start working. So I'm just going to show you guys a sample of what Postman is capable of. Firstly, I'm going to switch over to dark mode because dark mode is cool. And then I'm going to create a new request window. So using this plus sign, just like any browser with the plus signs at the top, you can just say plus sign, and that gives you a new request. Now, I already went ahead and searched for some public APIs. As we discussed, APIs basically are a gateway into your database. So people have APIs, various people have APIs, and I found this website, any-api.com, and I'll just try and go back to the very first page so you can see what they have to offer. So from the landing page, they show you a bunch of public facing APIs. So, you can just go ahead and click one and, test it out. So I went over to the Oxford Dictionary one where I would get a list of languages. So they show you all of the endpoints, right? So in building out the API, they link to the database. Sure, they have a common URL, but then they have different endpoints that will give different bits of information, right? And then they have different methods, get and post, and you have put and you have some other ones. But the fact is that you have to know the request type. You have to know the URL through which you can get that request satisfied. You have to know if you have to pass in headers. So here I know I need the applications key and ID. And then they show me the responses. So 200 means okay. And then they show me an example in JSON what that response would be. And then 404 means not found. 500 means that there's an internal error, usually with the home server, not with you, right? So 404 means that you're probably searching for something that doesn't exist. 500 means that the API provider has an error. All right, so I switched from any API and I'm going to freeforexapi.com. Sorry, so I took a closer look at any API and I realized that all of those APIs require that you would have had an account, be a registered user, probably a paying user of those platforms. You can look through, you see Instagram, you see YouTube, Google. Most of those are protected APIs, so they're using some amount of security around it. And we're going to go through all of those techniques in this course. But right now, I just want you to have the quick win and satisfaction of seeing what Postman can do and the relevance of it, right? So I found freeforexapi.com, right? You can just type that in, freeforexapi.com. And then we'll go over to documentation. So that landing page is actually their demo of them consuming the data through the API that they're exposing, right? So they have a database, they built an API, and then they're making a series of API calls to show the trading index between Euro and USD, Euro and GBP, etc., etc. So if I go to documentation, they will, give me the terms of use, tell me how to use it. So documentation is very, very important and vital when it comes to APIs. And we'll be using Swagger UI or swashbuckle. When we get there, you'll see, but we'll be focusing on documenting our APIs to a great extent also. So from here, they show you that you have that's the domain that the API is hosted on, right? And then as you go down, you'll see the different types of functionality that they expose. So they say get rates data, right? And then they say to make the request, it is a get request. And then you have the endpoint, sorry, the URL and the endpoint. That's what it needs to look like. And this is a sample response. All right. And if you look through, you'll see another one that you can get different pairs. So right here, you're only looking up the Euro USD one, and they return that the results of that query for you. And then in this one, you can get more than one if you want. So you just put in both indexes that you're interested in as the parameter in that endpoint. All right, so that's a query string with the values. The query is run, and then this is the response from the API once that query is run and the data is found. Now, the error codes tell a good story, because then if you pass in two pairs that don't exist in their system, then they're telling you that, well, it's if you don't pass in any, it's telling you it's required. And if you pass in something that's not there, then you'll see an error code 1002. So you have standard error codes and you have some error codes that you yourself can make. So let's try this sample. So I'm going to try the first one where I'm getting Euro and USD. So I'm just going to copy this link, which they said that's how you get to the data on this endpoint. And then I'm going to open up Postman. And then what I'm going to do is paste it inside of this. So it says enter request URL. That's what we just copied, right? Request and the URL. So I paste the request URL. And then the verb here, remember I was saying you can do get, post, you have put, patch, delete, you have a bunch of them. So get is usually used when you're expecting to retrieve data, right? So get, and then free Forex API, well, whatever that request URL was, I'm not going to commit it to memory because it's there in the documentation. And then I will click send. Now what Postman does is mimic a call. Well, not really mimic. It actually performs the call to that API endpoint and then retrieves the data in the response. So we see here, it may not be as well formatted as how it is in the documentation. Of course, they're putting their best foot forward, but it's the same bit of information. We're getting a rate and we're getting a timestamp and we're getting a code 200. If you look to the right, you'll see the status 200 OK. So 200 is the universal response for OK. Once you get a 200 response, you know everything is OK. So the different numbers have different meanings, of course, right? The time it took to make the call. So this is a quick API. It took only, that's what, half a second. And the size of the response, right? You can always format it. So this, you can click pretty, or you can say raw, or preview, or visualize. I'm not sure why pretty. Oh, that's right. I have to change the format. So it's pretty HTML. So this is how good it can look in HTML. But if I click this, I can say something like XML. Well, it's not XML. I said HTML. Let me click JSON, which it is. And there we go. So now it's pretty JSON. So now it looks a bit more like how it is being previewed in their documentation, right? So Postman is very handy when you just want to test what the response will look like. JSON is the most widely used response type. Well, I'm saying that loosely. I like to use JSON responses, but the closest alternative to that would be XML. And well, you know, once the data is being returned that the user expects and you've documented what they can expect, then you can feel confident that anybody can use your API when needed. So Postman is going to come in handy as we go about developing our API and just want to validate that the responses look the way we expect them to.